Now we've got everything hooked up. We've got our interface, it connects to our data archive through its buffer subsystem, and it also connects to our OPC server. Our infrastructure is looking a little bit like this. Okay, the next thing to do is actually get data flowing. We haven't got any data from our DCS all the way to our data archive yet. The first thing we need to do to get that happening is create a tag. Creating a tag effectively creates us a place to store data for this sensor in the data archive. It stores data in two different ways. So it has these two little places. One of them is called the snapshot, and the other one is called the archive. We saw that the data archive can have many archive files. It only has really one snapshot. The snapshot stores the current value of each tag that's been created, and the archive stores historical data for those tags. When you create a tag, it allocates a little bit of room in the snapshot for the most recent value that the tag has received from all the way from the sensor through the OPC server, etc. And it allocates a little record in the most recent archive to store historical data for the tag. Now this tag doesn't only have data associated with it, it also has attributes. So this tag has a name, a description, units of measure, and a bunch of other things that we're going to configure. The easiest way to understand what a tag is to create one. And here we are on PySRV01, and we've got PySystem Management Tools open. System Management Tools is the application we use to make tags one by one. We'll be making tags in bulk later in the course using Excel. But for now, navigate through to Points, and then Point Builder. We're going to create a new tag, so click New. Then we have to fill in some of these details. We have to give it a name. Now we're creating a tag for the bearing temperature of pump number 1. Now this is where we decide on what to call our tag. This is where it'll be useful if we had a tag naming convention of some kind. Usually you'll want to base this on the tag naming convention of your control system, but we're going to make one up as we go along. So this is the bearing temperature of pump 1, so we're calling it pump 1 dot bearing temp. There's a few more things to fill in here. There's a descriptor, so the bearing temperature of pump 1. There's a few more things to fill in this pane. First off is the point source. The point source must match the point source parameter of the interface we would like to load this tag. So we want to use our interface that we just created to see this tag, load it, and then gather data from the OPC server. So this point source needs to match that on the ICU. So we can flick over to our PyInt01, and we can see that the point source of our PyInt01 is OPC. So let's flick back and type in OPC in the point source. Next up, engineering units, always important. I know that this bearing temperature is in degrees Celsius, and we're going to navigate to the Classic tab. Now the first thing we need to fill in here is the instrument tag. The instrument tag has to correspond to the item ID of this tag on the OPC server. I happen to know that the item ID of this is sample process / pump 1 / bearing temp. So we'll fill that in there. A few more of these need to match some other things. Location 1 must match the interface ID of the interface we want to load it. So let's go over to our PyInt01 and see our interface ID is 1. Let's go back and fill in 1 here. Location 3 decides if this tag is going to be polled or advised. We'd like a advised tag. Location 4 must correspond to the interface's Location 4 must match the number of the scan class of this interface, corresponding to the scan rate at which we want to scan this tag. We can go over to our PyInt01. We can see 4 different scan classes. 3 of 1 second and 1 of 2 seconds. The 1 seconds do seem redundant, but different scan classes will be loaded as different groups on the OPC server. The OPC server will have in its specification how many tags are allowed to be part of a single group, and you can use these scan frequencies to separate them out. So we want our tag to be a 1 second advise tag. We're going to talk about advise tags in a little bit. That corresponds to the first scan class. The last thing to fill in is the security. Now, security has point security and data security. Anyone with write access to point security can edit the attributes that we're editing right now. Anyone with access to data security can write data to the tag. So we need to add in our interface identity to the data security. So we're going to go add, find our interface identity, add it in, and OK. We need to give it write access. We can save our tag now. And we can go take a look at what's happening on the interface side. So let's go to PyInt01. So the interface will check for new points every 2 minutes, and then it'll load 25 changes every 30 seconds after that. Now we're going to wait a little while, and it looks like our point has just been picked up. Okay, so now we've added point pump1.bearingtemp. It's been added to the interface, and now we have at least required %good tags. So we have at least 80% of our tags getting good data. Our device status is now 0. 0 means good. That means no errors, and we're good. So we can now go back to PySRV01, and let's see if data is actually coming through for this tag. To check that, we go to Data and Current Values. Let's search for the tag. Now in this tag search window, the easiest way to search for all the tags belonging to an interface is to type the point source of the interface in here. So as an administrator, you'll get pretty used to the point sources that you use. We used OPC for ours, which is very generic. Generally, you'll name these point sources when you create OPC instances, corresponding to where the data is actually coming from. Which control system, which location. Okay, we found one tag. And OK. So I see that my tag has a value. And if I press the play button, it will sign up for updates from this tag. So whenever the value changes, we can see the change coming through. So note that this is a 1 second advise tag. We controlled that with the location 3 parameter. So if I go back down to point builder, into classic, our location 3 parameter told us if this was an advise or a poll tag. If it was a poll tag, we would get a new value every second no matter what. If it's an advise tag, we get a new value whenever the OPC server decides that it's changed. So an advise tag is equivalent to the interface asking the OPC server to send it updates when it feels like, but no more often than every 1 second. That's what a 1 second advise scan class means. Generally, it's best practice to use advise tags in most OPC servers. And you'll be able to see this if you read the documentation of the OPC server you're using. Generally, they perform much better with advise tags. However, it's useful to have at least one poll tag, mainly because if that poll tag breaks, then you know data is not flowing. it's hard to tell if data has stopped flowing if all your tags are advised tags.